Good afternoon, everyone. Some of my students have asked for a video to do with every formula that might come up in A-level exams. So I have purposefully left one out of this presentation. So I challenge you to find out which one it is and stick it in the comments. And not that I can give you merits or prizes, but yeah, it's a bit of competition really. Also, it's another way of revising. So I'm going to put up the key term, like sales volume, for example. And then what I would like you to do is like you to think about it. What is the formula? And also think about things that we might question. So if it's a financial formula, there's normally something we can question the reliability of it. Well, sales volume is probably not one of those, is it? It's not exactly a forecast, but anything that's a forecast, debt ratios, for example, well, they're not really a forecast, but how useful are they in the future? Same sort of thing with sales volume, really. So why are we interested? Well, maybe we can calculate the potential sales for the future. Maybe we're just reporting to shareholders, keep them happy so they don't sell our shares. Anyway, we'll go through this as quickly as we can. Stick it on 1.5 times chipmunk speed if you want to, or pause if you're unsure. Okay, so sales volume, here's the formula, and here's a worked example. Now remember, we are talking about units here. So if we're talking about units, we're going to round that up. You don't round it down. Think about your break even when we're looking at how many units do we need to break even. You're not going to round it down because you won't break even. You've been taught that in class, you'll be fine. So sales volume and the sales revenue triangle, so exciting. And we can see that that's how you would work it out, hey? I think it's self-explanatory. Take a screenshot, download the form from the website, which, as I say, I'll put the link into the description down below. Total costs. And here we are. So when you're writing your formula, you can just write it like that if you want to. At least you're going to get 1 mark out of 4. It depends if it's an essay or not, of course. So we're thinking about what those costs are. Now we're writing the formulas down. Top tip from the examiner paper, examiner report even, is write your formula in words, then go to the case study, identify the numbers they give you. They're always going to give you something. They'll make you work for something else, and then you're going to be able to calculate whatever they're asking. Okay. Also, you can think about this from an essay perspective. So these total fixed costs, for example, well, some of these are semi-variable costs. So fixed costs might be salaries. Well, salaries might go up mid-year, depending if you negotiate, for example. They normally go up annually. Whereas, obviously, our variable costs would be those part-time salaries. Well, some part-time people might go full-time. It could actually impact that in year. So you need to identify that from the case study. So contribution, and we've got total selling price, variable cost per unit. And remember, this could change over time depending on the sector. Depends if you've agreed those fixed sticky prices, for example, those menu prices. And it could be that you're in a dynamic market and you might need to adjust your selling price. So these sorts of things can be questioned, of course. Here's our lovely break-even diagram. Now, I've not seen a break-even diagram question in a paper 2 before, but we have seen it in an AS paper. So actually, they could give you a partially completed break-even diagram, and they might say, draw a break-even diagram that illustrates where the break-even point is. Okay, you need to be able to draw these things in a heartbeat. It's very easy. You've practiced it before in class. If you've not practiced it recently and you're a little bit unsure, well, guess what you should be doing this afternoon? So here's our break even, and we know that the total revenue equals the total costs, and we also understand that sometimes it doesn't factor in certain things. So our total variable costs, well, maybe if I'm actually selling more bulk, I get economies of scale of bulk discount. It doesn't really factor that into it. It's quite a blunt forecasting tool, but it does help us to focus on where our break even is, because our break even above that could possibly be either that margin of safety, so you're going to need to know that key term, or it could be obviously where your profitability comes from. Okay, so it's nice to forecast that, especially when you've got investors breathing down your neck. So break-even output, clearly we are going to round to the nearest number upwards, not so much nearest, ignore that. So you've got a word calculation there. It's pretty easy. Okay, contribution equals selling price minus variable costs, and then we've got fixed cost divided by contribution equals break-even point. So it's quite easy just to write those down first, then go and look for your numbers, calculate it, stick it in some sort of logical order in the same structure as your definition, and then you won't have a sea of messy numbers everywhere. Okay, messy numbers means you've spent probably too much time on it. Gross profit. So if we think about this, we've got revenue minus our COGS there equals gross profit. We could also consider this as added value per unit, for instance. Yeah, if this was total gross profit, then it might be total added value for that category. So think about how these types of terms could help you in essays. Then we've got some margin. Well, clearly, not exactly difficult maths in business, is it really? So you just need to memorize the formulas, really. Operating profit. There we go. Not the most exciting video, but this is quite useful for some. Operating profit margins. Net profit, as in profit for the year. Okay. And we've got a lovely diagram here. Now remember, according to the Chief Examiner reports, students get confused over diagrams. So expect one, hey, because they need to give someone a C grade. So you need to be thinking about trends. It could be we've got this best fit line. It could be we choose one point and compare it to another. There could be lots of different things that we could do here. It could be working out the changes in profit margin, for example. Okay? Pretty easy one. If you can't get this, we've got trouble. Cost of sales. Well, raw materials, not always. I don't like that word, to be honest with you. I'd rather you describe it. But we haven't got a case study. But don't be one of those students that talk about raw materials and customers and products. Give it a bit of context. Now we get onto some of those ratios. Okay. And you've got an interpretation of it down the bottom there as well. Quite an easy format though, isn't it? Put your formula in words, stick the numbers in, and then this is what it means in an essay. I do love financial essays. Acid test ratio, slightly different there. And remember, there's not an ideal number for this. I think some textbooks insinuate that this is quite high. Well, it depends on the business model, So you've got companies like Tesco's that might have a lot of debt on their books. But if you think about it, it might be because they don't pay for anything within the first 6 months to quite a lot of their suppliers. And I'm thinking they sell apples quicker than 6 months. So it might be that it looks like they've got a lot of debt. However, they've sold most of their stock before they have to pay for it. A very good business model. So don't generalize across all businesses, because not all businesses are the same. At the moment in the car industry, there's lots of car producers that are in a lot of debt because they can't shift their cars. Well, those aren't going to go mouldy on the shelf, but they're paying extra insurance and everything else because of those storage costs. Working capital. Okay, labour productivity, output per worker per hour or output per worker, depending what they ask you in the case study. Capacity utilisation, expect, I think, something like this in paper 3 if we're thinking about how to get more profit out of a factory. Primark are very good at negotiating with people to make clothes out of season, for example. The airline industry, very low profit margin per seat, which means they need to fill planes. Okay, which means 250 are occupied. Okay, it also means you can work out how many are empty. What are they doing with them? Are they refurbishing them? Are they just empty? Yeah, do they send cleaners into these rooms every single day? So you've got to think about what that percentage actually means. Is this, if it's a hotel, is this winter? Is this summer? So all of those sorts of things are really, really important. Exchange rates, as we've said in the previous video, confuse people. Just make sure you understand not only SPICE, but the other thing around the other way. I won't try and pronounce it because it's silly. But, you know, just imagine the supply chain, okay? Just imagine the supply chain. Raw materials, whatever that is, cloth, for example, comes into sunny Leicester. They stitch it into garments. They then send it on to Germany. So you have to think about the added value in there as well. So yes, exchange rates are important, but what about the added value process? It might be that there's a little bit of fluctuation in the exchange rates. Well, actually, there are winners and losers with that, depending when you're buying and selling. However, if there's a big depreciation over a longer period of time and it stays there, that's a different story for your essays. So don't just generalize using SPICE. Look at the case study. Now, this is literally prep school maths. However, if you can't do percentage change, you're a bit stuffed really for the entire A-level. So this is in so many formulas and so many things that you can do. If you see numbers, do a calculation, even if it's a subtraction, but you've got to be able to do percentage change. So I'm sorry to insult you by putting the formula up. A bit of PED, which we do know is obviously theme 1. But we do love a bit of PED and YED. We won't dwell on this because you've already had it in paper 1 earlier in the week. But we can use these theories in essays depending on mass market, niche market. It could be something that helps with profitability. Well, profit is probably one of those topics that might come up, even if it's just the hook. Market size, again, another theme 1 unit here, but you know, there's need to understand these things when we're talking about a bit of Porter's 5 forces with that power of the supplier, for example. And then we go on to the gearing ratios where we're thinking about some of those upper 6th style of analysis using numbers, a bit of return on capital expenditure. Didn't steal that one from anyone's website, did we? Do apologise. I've done revision videos on all of these for you. Very basic calculation. What you will get in the case study is probably something like that. You then obviously calculate it, list it nice and neatly, total it up down the bottom, and then obviously take away your initial investment, and then you can decide if it's a good thing or not. In this example, that was already put in as a minus figure, so you didn't have to take it off down the bottom. And that's it. So why don't you put in the comments which one's missing? Hopefully that was useful, and if it wasn't, I apologise. That's a horrible video. But download the original ones from the link in the description and decide if you want to update your notes. Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon.